Welcome to this video in the SketchUp series. If you are doing this with one of my classes at North Keilor, chances are this will be the third video you're watching. The first two being an introduction to the layout of the program, and the second one being a very basic introduction to just drawing a cube. When I say basic, it did take about 17 minutes to explain everything, but then as I demonstrated at the end, the actual process, once you become familiar, took all of about 19 seconds. So if you haven't watched those two, you might need to go back and watch those. If this is revision for you or you feel comfortable already, then of course you're welcome to proceed. We will, as always, start with a fresh design space. So the first two things I will always do is come over to the information area and make sure that I am using in the length and units, millimeters, with at least one decimal place of precision. So let's pop that back away. And I'll also always begin by saving my work. So again, in my school, in my classes, you need to choose OneDrive, and I have a format that I expect, which is your last name, your first name, and then the piece of work. Now this is going to be a butt joint, a very simple joint that we're going to demonstrate. So for me, I would write Tomic Nathan being my last and then first name, and then butt joint. Okay, very, very simple, although I would prefer to have a capital B there. Press save, or in my case overwrite, because of course I've done this several times before with classes both in and on video, but hopefully you're just saving. So there it is up the top, and it's currently saved as a blank, essentially, document or design, sorry. And then the last thing I usually do is get rid of the reference person because we don't need them. Now, what we're going to create is a very simple corner, just using a butt joint. If you don't exactly know what a butt joint is, you're A, going to see it when we're finished, and B, hopefully we've actually talked about it and seen it in a class beforehand. We're going to create this with a piece of material that we're going to sketch here, which is going to be 100 millimeters long, it's going to be 40 millimeters wide, and it's going to be 19 millimeters thick. And that is to simulate a piece of wood that we are likely going to use in my classroom to actually make this later on. Again, those measurements are not really critical, other than the point that we want to practice always putting real measurements in, not just randomly drawing. And if you haven't watched the first video about drawing a cube, where I talk a bit more about that, you might want to go back and watch that bit to understand why it's so important not to just draw it, but to actually use real measurements. So let's begin. I'll start with my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw something that, again, that looks rough with the shape I want. So I want a longer, thinner rectangle like that. As we know, we let go of our mouse immediately, and we then start typing our measurements. So again, if I look to my dimensions down the bottom right, currently the box I've actually drawn is 1,820 millimeters long by 824. Certainly not the 100 by 40 that I'm expecting. So I start typing 100, 40, and we know we press enter or return on your keyboard, and it will resize that to be the correct size. In my case, it looks like it shrank because I'm zoomed out quite a bit. If by some chance you are actually already zoomed in quite far, it might appear to get bigger. From here, I am going to zoom in. So I have talked in a previous video about the real benefit of having an actual mouse with a scroll wheel, because I can literally just zoom in like I'm doing now, which is so much easier. But as we know, if you didn't have that, let me zoom out. There are tools over here in the ... menu, various zoom tools you can use, and also possibly the zoom to extents, because there's not much yet in our program, in our design. But again, I'm going to use the more efficient method, which is my scroll wheel, because I want to keep moving. So here I have my correct piece. We've got our 100 millimeter length, our 40 millimeter width, but now I need my 19 millimeter thickness. And just like we've seen earlier, I'll simply use my push-pull tool, come over to the area. You can see that that now is highlighted. I'm going to bring it up any amount, it doesn't matter, let go, and again I'm going to type in my thickness measurement, which we know is 19. Press enter or return, and I now have a piece. So this would be the same as a physical piece of wood or material that you were given in class that you are then going to use for a butt joint. Before I go any further, because I'm going to need 2 of these, I don't want to have to go and draw a second one. You could, absolutely, but we always want to think, how can we do things more efficiently? How can we be smart about what we're doing? And one of the benefits, of course, of designing in something like SketchUp or in a virtual environment is that we can duplicate things. We can make copies of things. We don't have to do all the steps twice. But before we do that, the best thing we can do is make this into what we call a component. Basically make all those pieces into one piece. And what I want to do is demonstrate why that's important right now. So let's say I was going to try and move something here. So if I try to grab this and move it, look what happens. It's all bending and getting skewed because what I'm actually doing is moving this face, this side, and everything else is trying to follow it around. All right, let me just undo to make sure I get my sizes back to be proper. Instead, what I'm going to do is grab my selection tool and I'm going to draw a big box around everything so all of it gets highlighted. And if I was in fact to rotate around, and again I'm using my scroll wheel for this, you can see even on the back everything has been highlighted. Really, really important that everything gets highlighted. Because what I'm now going to do is make the component. And I do that by right clicking, which again using my mouse, or otherwise you can do it, I think it's a 2-finger click on a touchpad, and I'm going to choose this make component. So if I choose that, I get a pop-up window where I can name it. For the purposes in this video, I don't care, so I'll just keep the component 1 that it comes up with, and I'm also not worried about anything else for the moment. These will come in at later stages in more complex projects, but for right now, we're just going to press OK. And what I want you to notice now is that whole thing is still selected. If I go off it and click back on, everything gets chosen. And now if I try to move it, and we'll talk about the moving tool properly a little bit later, you can see the whole thing moves together. It's not being sort of pulled apart and stretched and all that sort of thing. It's now a single piece. Okay? So what's really good about that now is I can choose it and I can copy it. And again, think about how you can be smart. So you can right click or 2-finger click and choose the copy and paste, or you can even use the built-in copy and paste. So on a Windows computer, that's Control-C, Control-V for copy paste, just like in Word. On a Mac, I believe it's Command-C, Command-V. So you can do a similar thing, Control-C and Control-V. And if I just move my mouse, there is my copy that I just pasted in. I'm just going to click over there to put it out of the way. Okay, so now I've got 2 of the same piece. Everything I just did here has literally been done again without me having to do each of the steps. So I'm working smarter, not harder. Let's now talk about what's next, because what we want is a corner joint. We want a vertical piece and a horizontal, but currently we've got 2 horizontal pieces. So let's talk about rotating this one in front. So first of all, make sure it's chosen. So use your selection tool and click on it so that this is the one we're modifying, not the one at the back. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose my rotation tool, this 2-arrow rotation. And when I bring it out, you'll see it's a bit of a compass. Now I have to think about my axes here. Remember, we have 3 axes. We have a vertical axis, a horizontal, and a depth axis. If I zoom out a little bit, you might be able to see those again. So our horizontal is the red, our vertical is the blue, and our depth, if you like, is green. Let's just come back. So what I want to think about is how this is going to rotate. I want this to come and stand upways. So I think about the axis that's going to rotate. If I was to draw a line through it, it is this green axis I want. I want it to rotate around in the way that this green one is showing. Okay? So I'm going to move my, my rotation tool onto an edge like this until I get it to be green. Now, the rotation tool has 2 points that it needs. The first point, which will be our first click in a moment, creates the point that it actually rotates on. So it's like putting a hinge in there, or a rotation point, and everything rotates around it. We then move our mouse and click a second time, and that's like the handle that we're using to rotate from. It's really important if you can to try and keep things on axes. So if I zoom in a little bit further, just so I can really see it, I might grab it here with a click, and I'm bringing it, and I'm trying to stay on that red. I don't want to go off, because if I go off, it might look straight, but I'm actually moving horizontally across, or sorry, diagonally across. So if I did try to rotate, I'm not just rotating around one axis right now, I would rotate around 2, and it would get twisted around. So I want to try and stay on my red axis horizontally. Let's just go to here. That's perfectly fine. Click again. And now when I move my mouse up, you'll see from this point, it is pivoting around that point there. Sorry, it's a bit hard to do because I can't move my mouse. So I'm just rotating around, and when I'm happy with how far it's rotated, I can just press my mouse button again. Now, notice while you're rotating down the bottom, instead of saying dimensions, it now says angle in the bottom right, and I can obviously see the angle I want. But just like dimensions, I can rotate in the direction I want some amount, so that's 11.3 degrees at the moment, and I can type in without clicking anywhere else. So I know that I want to completely stand this up, so I know that's 90 degrees. So I can literally just type 90, just like we've seen with dimensions before, press enter, and it will perfectly rotate to that degrees. So now I have one that is vertical and one that is horizontal. So that's looking really good so far. We will come and grab the movement tool. That's our 4-way arrow. And actually before that, sorry, because it's this one at the back I want to move, I need to select it. So let's select it first so it's highlighted. Now let's grab that movement tool. So if I come over and click on it now and hold down my mouse button, I can move this piece around. Okay, but what's interesting, of course, is again, you're in 3D space. So even though this looks like it's kind of lined up, if I rotate round, it's not really, it's more towards me because the angle I'm looking at it affects the way I see things, of course. So even though it might look like it is in a good position, it may not be. So what I always say, again, this is why a scroll mouse with that button so I can easily rotate is so useful at the moment, because it makes it so much easier to quickly rotate, zoom in and out to get the best angle. So I'm going to use an angle about here, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to take this corner down the bottom, and if I think about how it will sit across the top here, this corner is going to be touching this corner. Okay, this corner here will touch that corner and it'll stick out across here. Now, this is important because things in SketchUp want to try and lock together. So if you take a corner, you can easily lock it to another corner or on a line or things like that. So I'm going to use that to make sure I line things up completely perfectly. If I just tried to grab it and move it into where I think the right position is, chances are it might be a bit stuck in like it is there, or it might be a real fraction of a millimeter higher or not lined up, and it might be really hard to see that. But again, if you were to send this off to be made or something like that, then those would be errors that would actually really cause you troubles later on. So what I'm going to do, as I said, is take the fact that I know this corner needs to join to that corner. So I'm going to click and hold on the corner, and I'm going to try and move my mouse to match the other corner. You can see how when I get close enough, it locks in place. It actually locks to that corner. So once it has done that, I can let go of my mouse button, and I actually now have a perfectly aligned butt joint. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm looking for. I don't want it to be a little bit out. All right, I need to make sure it is perfectly locked in place, and that idea of a corner locking to a corner is super useful for that. So once you are at this point, you are done with this particular project. So again, make sure you save regularly. I haven't done that for a while, so I should press the save button. And remember, we can always say purge because there's nothing that we're going to lose that is critical. So a little bit like when we did the cube, you can see that this has taken better part of 14 minutes to explain, but the actual process of making this would probably only take a minute, maybe a minute and a half once you're more familiar. And again, a little bit like I did in the cube, I'm going to demonstrate that for you just to keep reminding you that this is not a complicated process once you start becoming familiar. So let's do this task again, just next to it, without taking all that time. So I'm going to start again by drawing a basic shape that looks roughly what I want. I'm going to put my measurements in, which are 100 by 40. Press enter. I'm going to use my push-pull tool to bring that up, and I'm going to give that a thickness of 19. I'm then going to take all of that and turn it into a component. So there we go. It's going to be component 2 now. That's perfectly fine. And then I'm going to copy and paste that, a second copy over there. I'm going to choose the copy in front of me. I'm going to take my rotation tool, make sure I'm on the green axis in this case, not there, sorry, there, and just pick 2 spots, rotate 90 degrees exactly. Then I'm going to take my tool and select the one at the back, Then I'm going to take my movement tool, I'm going to grab that corner and I'm going to lock it to that corner and I'm done. I didn't actually look at the time properly, but I'm pretty certain that was a minute or less. You can double check and tell me in the comments if you really want to. But there you go. As you can see, it doesn't take particularly long to actually do once you become familiar with the basic tools and basic process. Okay? It doesn't have to be a butt joint, of course, you're making. It can be anything that has basic shapes that you need to put together. But there we go. We have finished this particular project. Make sure you have saved this. You only need one of them, of course, in your file. Make sure you've saved it. And if you're in one of my classes, have that ready to submit to our learning management system. If you're watching this and just having a go for yourself, hopefully this has helped you out.